Due process clause of the 14th Amendment is a source of array of constitutional rights, including many of the most cherished and most controversial. Consider the following rights of that clause guaranteed against the states: procedural protections such as notice and hearing before termination of entitlements such as publicly funded medical insurance. Individual rights listed in the Bill of Rights, including freedom of speech, free exercise of religion, the right to bear arms, and a variety of criminal procedure protections. Fundamental rights that are not specifically enumerated elsewhere in the Constitution, including the right to marry, the right to use contraception, and the right to abortion. The Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment echoes that of the Fifth Amendment, that the Fifth Amendment, however, applies only against federal government. After the Civil War, Congress adopted a number of measures to protect individual rights from interference by the states. Among them was the 14th Amendment, which prohibits the states from depriving a person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. When it was adopted, the clause was understood to mean that the government could deprive a person of right only according to the law applied by the court. Yet since then, the Supreme Court has elaborated significantly on the core as the examples above suggested. The right to protect under the 14th Amendment can be understood in three categories: procedural due process, which we spoke of, and that starts with effective assistance of counsel. The individual's rights listed in the Bill of Rights, we spoke on the quick and speedy trial, incorporated against the states, and substantial due process. Ooh, I hate when it does that. Procedural due process concerns a process the government must follow before it deprives an individual of life, liberty, and property. The key questions are: what procedures satisfy due process, and what constitutes life, liberty, and property? Historically, due process only entails a jury trial. The jury determined the facts, and the judge enforced the law. In the past 2 centuries, however, states have developed a variety of institutions and procedures for adjudicating disputes. Making room for these innovations, the court has determined that due process requires, at a minimum notice, an opportunity to be heard. And if you check the Code of Judicial Conduct, judges don't like to hear a litigant, but he's to give everybody the time to speak, respect. They're supposed to be cordial, polite. An impartial tribunal. Well, if the judge is apolitical, I would consider that an impartial tribunal. With regard to the meaning of life, liberty, and property, perhaps most notable development is the court's expansion and notion of property beyond real and personal property. In 1970 case of Goldberg versus Kelly, the court found that some governmental benefits, in the case welfare benefits, amount of property with due process protections. Courts evaluate procedure for depriving someone of a new property right by considering the nature of the property right, the adequacy of procedure compared to other procedures, and the burden of other procedures would impose on the state. Incorporation of the Bill of Rights against the states. The Bill of Rights compromises the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are really applied only to the federal government. Those who sought to protect their rights from state governments had to rely on state constitution and laws. One of the purposes of the 14th Amendment was to provide federal protection of individual rights against the state. Early on, however, the Supreme Court, remember how I told you that any law repugnant to the U.S. Constitution is null and void? Well, that's what they're talking about. was to provide federal protection to individual rights against the states. Early on, however, the Supreme Court foreclosed 14th Amendment privileges, immunity clauses as a source for robust individual rights against the states. Since then, the court has held that due process clause incorporates many, but still not all, the individual protections of the Bill of Rights against the state. Provision of the Bill of Rights is incorporated against the states. This means that the state government as well as the federal government are required to abide by it. If it is not incorporated against the state, it applies only to the federal government. Celebrated debate about incorporation occurred between two factions of the Supreme Court. One side believed that all rights should be incorporated wholesale, and others believed that only certain rights could be asserted against the states, while partial incorporation fraction prevailed. The victory rang somewhat hollow as a particular matter. Almost all the Bill of Rights have been incorporated against the states. The exceptions are the Third Amendment restrictions on quartering soldiers in private homes, the Fifth Amendment right to grand jury trial, Seventh Amendment right to jury trial in civil cases, which is wrong. If a judge isn't going to abide by the Code of Judicial Conduct, you can't trust them to. They're not going to bring it up. So no. You do have a right to a jury trial, and if they say no, you don't, just simply go over the Code of Judicial Conduct with them and the rules of professional conduct. Make sure everything is by the book, because they won't. Just like they won't see that you have a quick and speedy trial. Nobody's going to mention the rules, the codes, the letter of the law, spirit of the law, nothing. As I said, you literally have to go to law school and get that degree yourself and license to practice just to compete with these people. The court has also deemed that due process guarantees of the Fifth Amendment, 14th Amendment, the right to protect certain substantive rights that are not listed or enumerated in the Constitution. The idea is that certain liberties are so important that they cannot be infringed without a compelling reason, no matter how much process is given. And that's where the public trust doctrine come in. Remember, they're supposed to legally protect and safe keep the water, the air, and the land, and,